Hi, my name is Riley, and I guess you could say I found out the hard way what silence really costs. I wasn't supposed to hear it, just one late night standing in the hallway, overhearing my sister's voice say, "She's not my sister. She doesn't deserve to be your wife." And my husband? He didn't argue. That moment shattered something. So I did what no one expected. I moved $1 million out of our accounts, quietly, transferred assets, cleaned digital footprints, and within 24 hours, 63 missed calls. Not one of them to say sorry. What do you do when the people you trust most start treating you like a business move, a liability, a problem to erase? Can a woman like me, calm, composed, careful, be pushed far enough to fight back? Or worse, had I been fighting for the wrong family all along? The rain had started early that evening, a thin mist that clung to every window of the downtown restaurant like a memory that refused to fade. I stood in the entryway, shaking off my umbrella, and gave the hostess my name. She scrolled through her tablet once, twice, then offered a polite but puzzled smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't see you on the reservation for the Vail party tonight." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. This was the company's 3-year anniversary dinner. The event I had spent weeks planning when Marlowe Tech was still operating out of a rented co-working space. "Could you check under Marlowe?" I asked, my voice calm but tight. She shook her head. "Only Vail." My sister's married name. Through the glass divider I could see them. Arlo, my husband, laughing at something Cressida whispered in his ear, the senior managers raising glasses to a toast. The only empty space at the long table was an extra chair shoved to the end, half hidden by a plant. The hostess hesitated, then led me there. "We can add a chair here for you," she said softly, like she knew this wasn't how it should be. I sat down on the fringe of my own celebration. The napkin was missing, so I folded my coat over my lap instead. Nobody looked up. The waiter poured me water but didn't offer wine. I scanned the menus and realized mine didn't even have my name printed on the place card. It said, "Guest." As the first course arrived, conversations rolled over me like surf. "Here's to the visionaries who built this," someone announced. Laughter, glasses clinking. Not a single eye turned my way. In my head, I heard echoes of all the small slights. Cressida taking credit for my presentations, Arlo standing silent when colleagues praised the Vail sisters, as if I were just a junior partner. Even as a child, I was always the afterthought, the one left at the end of the bench during family photos. Now, 41, a founder in my own right, and still invisible at my own table. I forced a smile at a junior employee who glanced at me nervously. He looked away quickly, as if proximity to me might draw Cressida's glare. My sister had perfected that kind of power, the kind that rewrites stories while people are still living them. Halfway through the entrees, I excused myself. The restroom was down a narrow hall lined with coats and gift bags. I slowed when I heard Arlo's voice. "She's dead weight, Cressida. We can't grow if she stays attached." His words hit me like a door slamming. Then Cressida's reply, low and sharp. "She doesn't deserve to be your wife. She's not my sister. She's a liability we inherited." I froze. My hand on the doorframe tightened until my knuckles ached. The sound of their voices was so casual, so practiced, like they had been rehearsing this conversation for months. "After the merger, we'll push her out quietly," Arlo said. "She won't even see it coming." Cressida laughed, that smooth, public relations laugh she used on investors. I stepped back, careful not to make the floorboards creak. My stomach felt hollow, as if every meal I'd ever eaten with them had been emptied out. The hallway smelled of leather coats and expensive perfume, a scent suddenly sickening. I turned, walked into the restroom, locked the stall, and leaned against the cool tile. My reflection in the small mirror above the sink looked like someone else's face, pale, composed, but eyes burning. When I returned to the dining room, no one noticed. I slid back into my corner chair and lifted my glass as another toast was made. My sister's hand brushed Arlo's shoulder, a gesture too familiar to ignore. I felt a tremor move through my body, but forced my breathing to slow. Outwardly, I was still. Inside, an earthquake. The dessert plates arrived, glossy and sweet, but I tasted nothing. I heard someone say, "Riley's always been so quiet, reliable." I wondered if they understood quiet could also mean dangerous. I stood up before the coffee was poured. "I've got an early meeting tomorrow," I said, smiling. Nobody protested. Outside, the rain had turned heavier, streaking the pavement with silver. I didn't open my umbrella. The water on my face felt cleaner than the air inside. At the corner, waiting for the valet, I let the night fill my lungs and told myself, not tonight, not here. If they think I'll break, they've never met the real me. Driving home, the city lights blurred through the windshield. My phone buzzed with messages from people at the table. Perfunctory thanks for coming. I ignored them. At a red light, I opened my email app and scrolled to the folder marked Shares Legal. All the documents were there. My hand hovered over the contact for Astria, my attorney. By the time I reached my condo, my mind was already arranging moves like chess pieces. I poured a glass of water, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. The blue glow lit the room like a stage set for a new act. I didn't cry that night. I opened my laptop instead. I drove through the wet streets long after midnight, headlights sliding across rain-black asphalt like restless thoughts. By the time I parked in front of my townhouse, the city had gone quiet except for the hiss of drizzle and the occasional bus grinding uphill. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and coffee grounds, the kind of scent that used to mean comfort. I hung my coat, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to my small office at the back. The glow of the laptop was still waiting. I hadn't even turned the heat on yet. Morning arrived in fragments rather than a clean start. A gray light filtered through the blinds, touching the stack of folders I'd pulled from the filing cabinet overnight. I was still sitting at the desk, fingers cramped from scrolling, when the kettle whistled. The coffee I poured was bitter and lukewarm, but I drank it anyway, staring at the screen as if it were a courtroom. The equity dashboard blinked back at me, lines of text, percentage shares, names, but not mine. Where Riley Marlowe, co-founder, should have been, there was a blank cell, a tidy dash, and next to it, transferred. Transferred to a holding entity I'd never seen. My name had vanished like someone had erased me with a keystroke. I tried to breathe evenly, remembering what Astria once told me in law school. When you're ambushed, your first weapon is clarity. So I scrolled through every page, every amendment, every board vote from the past quarter. The pattern was too neat to be a clerical error. They'd been moving me out step by step, quiet, incremental, hoping I'd never notice until it was done. A ping broke the silence. New email. The subject line. Ownership review. Internal. My stomach tightened as I opened it. Brenna, Cressida's young assistant, had copied me by mistake on a reply-all thread. I read the first line twice to be sure. We should have full removal done before Q4. Riley's presence is redundant. Confirm final paperwork schedule. For a second, my vision blurred, not from tears, but from a sudden rush of heat in my head. They'd planned it months ago, down to the quarter. My sister's name at the top, Arlo CC'd. And here I was, reading the blueprint of my own erasure. I moved the cursor carefully, like handling evidence. Download, screenshot, archive. I created new folders on an external drive. Cressida Arlo removal plan. Evidence. I labeled each file with timestamps, dates, and email IDs. Every click steadied me. This wasn't shock anymore. It was a record. When the drive finished copying, I closed the lid and grabbed my coat again. The kitchen clock said 8:17. Arlo was still asleep upstairs, the kind of deep, oblivious sleep only someone certain of control could enjoy. I left him a note on the counter. Running errands. Nothing more. I drove to a small parking lot under a half-empty office building on Elliott Avenue, a place with no security cameras. Sitting in the car, engine off, I dialed Astria. She picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said. Her voice was low but steady, the same tone she'd used when we prepped for moot court years ago. "They've stripped me off the papers," I said. "Shares, voting rights, everything. Do you have proof?" I'm staring at it. "Then listen carefully. You don't confront them yet. You let me run a silent audit. No alert flags, no leaks. We do this clean." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Do it." I want every move they made tracked. I'll need a copy of everything. It's already on a drive, I said. I'll bring it to you tonight. There was a pause, then she asked softly, Are you safe, Riley? I looked out at the gray water of the bay. For now. They think I'm still asleep. Driving back up the hill, my hands steadied on the wheel. The city had begun to wake. Delivery trucks, joggers with headphones, a man walking his dog in a neon raincoat. Normal life moving as if nothing were happening. I envied them for a moment. Then I reminded myself I'd chosen this life. I'd built this company, and I wasn't about to hand it over to anyone, not even blood. As I parked in front of the house, a memory rose uninvited. The first board meeting 3 years ago, me suggesting a community outreach program, Cressida smiling that thin smile and saying, Great idea, but let's reframe it so investors don't think it's emotional. 2 weeks later, she pitched it as her own. Everyone clapped. Arlo squeezed my hand under the table, murmured, It's just optics. That was the moment I should have known. I walked into the kitchen. Arlo was at the counter pouring orange juice, acting as if last night had been any other dinner. He smiled. You slipped out early. Everything okay? I returned the smile. Just a little tired. Long day ahead. He kissed my cheek lightly, the gesture of a man rehearsing normalcy. Don't work too hard, he said. I sat across from him, breaking a piece of toast, nodding at his small talk. Inside, my mind was elsewhere, arranging steps, lines of attack, safe places to store evidence, next moves. Let him think I was still in the dark. Let him think I'd swallow it like every other slight. The longer he underestimated me, the sweeter the reversal would be. When he left for the gym, I went back upstairs and opened the drive once more, checking every folder. Each file was a brick in the foundation of my case. They believed they had buried me on paper. They had no idea I was already standing on the shovel. If they buried me on paper, I'll resurrect in court. The faint glow from my phone's screen cast a soft pool of light on the hallway carpet, illuminating fibers like a miniature spotlight on a stage. I stood frozen just outside the bedroom door, the message to Astria still open, stark and bright against the dark around me. My heart thundered in my chest, not from fear, not exactly, but from the force of something more ancient. Betrayal unearthed, raw clarity rising like smoke from long-dormant embers. I hadn't come looking for confrontation, and I certainly hadn't expected closure. But I had needed truth, clarity, and now it had found me, violently. Outside, wind stirred the skeletal branches beyond the windows, rattling the panes like knuckles drumming against old glass, the kind of sound you only hear when you're truly alone. It was deep into night now, well past when the city sleeps and dreams and forgets, but I was wide awake, standing still in the thick of discovery. By the time morning bled slowly into being, a dull, fractured light casting pale streaks through the attic windows, I found myself standing in storage, absent-mindedly rifling through boxes. I had come up here looking for a spare charger for an old tablet, but that was just the excuse I'd given myself. Truthfully, I couldn't sit still. I needed to move, to feel something other than the static hum inside my chest. The attic was like a time capsule of our family's half-forgotten life. Stacked bins labeled in my mother's cursive, faded photographs in frames, outgrown toys, obsolete electronics tangled in their own cords. Near the back corner, underneath a half-crushed box of holiday decorations, I spotted it, a wooden digital photo frame. I remembered it vaguely. My mother had used it once, loading it with looping slideshows for family gatherings, her way of saying, "See, we were happy once." It looked dusty, unloved, but something compelled me. I plugged it into the wall and waited. The screen flickered to life like it had just awoken from a long sleep. At first, it was sweet nostalgia. Pictures from birthdays I barely remembered, vacations at the lake house, fireworks at New Year's, Christmas lights strung across the banister, my father teaching me to open my first gift. There was warmth in it, moments I had long boxed up with the decorations. I smiled faintly at the blurred edges of memory, and then, the frame paused. The image shifted. There, in the soft-lit hallway of the cabin, wood-paneled walls, a faint glow from the nightlight casting elongated shadows, stood Cressida and Arlo. her body angled toward his, their faces too close, suspended in that tender, unmistakable breath before a kiss. His hand curved gently around her waist. Her eyes fluttered closed. The room dropped out from under me. The air in the attic turned to glass. I could hear my pulse inside my ears, a tidal wave pounding against bone. For a moment, I truly could not breathe. It played for a second, maybe two, then moved on. But I hit rewind. I had to be sure. There it was again. Not an accident. Not a blur. Not a trick of light. Cressida. My sister. Arlo. My Arlo. It was confirmation of what I had suspected on some hollow, whispering level for months. But no matter how prepared you think you are, truth still hits like a sledgehammer when it finally lands. A memory surged. The cabin hallway, 18 months ago. I'd been upstairs, curled beneath thick blankets, shaking off a cold that kept me from joining the others. They said they were going for a walk, Cressida and Arlo. I told myself it was innocent, just conversation, two people comforting each other while I recovered, but I had felt it. The house had been too quiet, the air too still, the energy wrong. I had dismissed it, dismissed myself. Now I knew better. I stood there, still clutching the photo frame in hands that had started to tremble. My breath came in shallow rasps. Grief rose in my throat, thick and acidic, tasting like old wine left out too long. It wasn't the grief of loss. It was the grief of recognition, of seeing that the people you love are not who you thought they were, that perhaps they never had been. I asked you both to protect me, I whispered into the stillness of the attic, and you devoured me instead. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. The tears came quietly, just 2 or 3, sliding over my knuckles as I pressed my hands against the frame. Then, without hesitation, I threw it against the wall. The glass shattered inward. The frame cracked and fell in a slow, splintered collapse. I bent down through the debris and retrieved the SD card. Evidence. The kind of proof that couldn't be talked around, diluted, or dismissed. I placed it inside a small velvet jewelry box labeled Evidence Box 1, a leftover from my mother's collection of old brooches and letters. The irony wasn't lost on me. Secrets inside boxes, families inside lies. Night fell again, thick and cold. I poured myself a small glass of red wine, the first in months. It tasted sharp, earthy, slightly bitter, but I welcomed it. I held the glass like a keepsake, not a habit. Then I picked up my phone and called Astria. I found something, I said. My voice was barely above a whisper. This isn't about money, or land, or control. It's personal now. She paused, long enough for me to brace. You need proof that no one can dismiss. If you go public too soon, they'll spin it. They'll say you're making it up or twisting things. I have the proof, I replied. Calm, clear. And I'm done waiting. We agreed to meet later that night. I packed the jewelry box in my purse, zipped it shut like I was locking away a part of myself. The shattered frame I left where it was, a silent witness to truth finally spoken. Downstairs, the house slept. Arlo's light was off. Cressida's car was gone. Maybe it was guilt, maybe fear, or maybe she just didn't care enough to hide anymore. Rain had started again. Just a mist at first. I didn't bother with an umbrella. I let it soak into my hair, my jacket, let the sky cry for me. Street lamps burned in soft halos, lighting my path as I walked to the car Astria sent. The world outside was still, unaware, unchanged, but inside me, everything was different now. I slid into the back seat and pulled the door closed. In the rearview mirror, I caught sight of myself, not the girl who had been betrayed, but the woman who had survived it. My own eyes staring back at me, clear and unyielding. Some kisses don't leave lipstick behind. They leave scars. And I wasn't ashamed of mine anymore. I didn't pause after snapping the jewelry box shut. The click of its clasp echoed louder than it should have in the still house. Outside, the rain had shifted from a whisper to a steady tapping, fingers drumming against the window panes as dawn crept up behind the horizon, a pale, gray promise of a day I hadn't asked for, but now had no choice but to face. My robe clung to my skin with the dampness of a sleepless night. My phone was already awake when I stepped off the stairwell, its screen glowing like an impatient eye in the darkness. Notifications flooded the screen. Articles, blog posts, tagged mentions, trending hashtags. Headlines screamed one name over and over: Cressida Vale, the face of family-led tech. And beneath each triumphant headline, a single devastating line: Miracle baby, Cressida claims Riley's child as her own. It felt like a punch I'd known was coming but still couldn't brace for. My breath came out in a shudder, my hands tightening around the phone until my knuckles ached. How many lies had they built while I slept? How much of my life had been rewritten in the hours between midnight and morning? I wrapped my robe tighter around my chest, as if fabric could hold together the parts of me that were beginning to come apart. The kitchen smelled of rain and burnt coffee grounds. I poured a cup of black coffee anyway, strong, almost bitter enough to steady me, and opened Marlotech's homepage. My name was gone, not hidden, gone. No mention of my role as co-founder. My headshot, my bio, vanished. Even archived press releases had been edited to omit me. The team page now listed only Vale sisters, their smiling faces aligned like soldiers. They had cropped me out of old group photos. Even the reunion video from last Christmas had been re-uploaded with me blurred, a ghost haunting the edge of their narrative. The implication was chilling and total. I had never belonged here at all. By midday, after hours of scrolling through doctored press clippings and manipulated timelines, I found myself sitting at a small corner table in a bustling cafe, the kind of place where the smell of espresso and steamed milk made a thin shield between you and the outside world. My mug steamed in front of me. The chatter of other customers blurred into a kind of white noise, office workers talking about deadlines, students hunched over laptops. A few patrons glanced my way, not recognizing the me who sat there now. They saw the public version, the name still trending, not the person who had been erased overnight. I tapped my screen, opened a blank post window, and began to type. My fingers hovered for a moment, then found the words, "Truth doesn't disappear when you delete its witnesses." I stared at it, rereading twice. The weight of it settled on me like armor. Then, without hesitation, I hit post. Within minutes, the responses began rolling in. Likes, retweets, comments. Whoa. Tell her. She's lying. Receipts? A digital chorus building around me, each note a reminder that I was no longer entirely alone in this fight. This was no longer just my story, my pain. The act of posting had cracked something open. I stood up and stepped outside into the light drizzle. The sky was the color of tarnished silver, streetlights still faintly glowing, even though it was noon. I dialed Cressida's number, my thumb trembling only once before pressing the green button. She answered after 2 rings, her voice smooth and practiced, like she was already on camera. "Hello, Riley," she said. "What a surprise." "I want my name back," I told her, my voice low but clear. "You've crossed into legal territory now." She gave a small laugh, the kind that's soft but sharp at the edges. "You want war? Make sure you're dressed for it." The line clicked, conversation over, but her words remained, heavy with the weight of a promise or a threat. The drizzle thickened into rain. My knees felt weak, but I kept walking, ducking into a quiet hotel lobby nearby, one of my safe call zones, neutral ground. I sat on a velvet bench beneath a gilded mirror and dialed Astria. "She's playing by her own rules," I said when she answered. My voice cracked only once. "She's erased me." "Yes, she is," Astria replied, steady as ever. "But we can reverse it. You have to wait until we have airtight proof. If you move too soon, they'll twist it, frame it as manipulation." I exhaled, pressing the phone to my forehead. I knew she was right, but waiting felt like drowning. Later that day, I sat in my car across the street from my condo, engine off, watching the world move as if nothing had changed. Arlo passed by on his way to work, coffee cup in hand, looking casual, like a man whose life wasn't imploding. My thumb hovered over my phone screen before pressing like on my earlier post, a small but deliberate reclaiming of my name, my presence. It was symbolic, but symbols mattered. That evening, alone in the soft glow of a lamp, I composed a letter to my son. I posted it to my private social channel, not public, but accessible to those who mattered. The words poured out of me in one long breath. You may not see my face in their stories, but you carry my heart, always. No matter what they erase, you are my living proof. I sent it, sat back, and watched as it spread anyway. Shares, comments, quiet whispers echoing beyond my small circle. People noticed discrepancies in Cressida's statements. Someone pointed out the detail of a mother's gift she had referenced in an interview, a gift I had bought, chosen, and wrapped for my son. Piece by piece, her narrative began to fray at the edges. Then, as quickly as I had posted it, I deleted the letter from public view. It had served its purpose. My mark had been made. My truth had slipped through the cracks she thought she had sealed. I closed my laptop and stared at the rain-streaked window, my reflection faint but steady. "Erase me from your timeline, Cressida," I whispered into the empty room. "But you can't delete the receipts." Outside, the rain fell heavier, like applause against the glass. Dawn had promised a day I hadn't wanted. Nightfall brought something else. Resolve. My name might be missing from their website, my face blurred from their videos, but I was still here. And I wasn't finished. The automatic doors of Harper Financial parted at exactly 9 a.m., releasing a faint gust of air conditioning into the damp morning. I stepped inside, closing my umbrella and shaking off the last droplets onto the gleaming marble floor. The building smelled faintly of lemon polish and wet pavement. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching on brass accents and glass balustrades, but the brightness did little to soften the atmosphere. There was a static tension in the air, the charged quiet that comes right before a thunderstorm breaks. The receptionist, a young woman with careful mascara and a practiced smile, looked up as I approached. Her eyes flickered briefly with sympathy, like she already knew this wasn't an ordinary appointment. I gave a short nod and moved past her without breaking stride, clutching my slim leather portfolio like a shield. Inside the private offices, behind a glass wall etched with frost patterns, stood Mr. Dalton, my financial advisor, my longtime confidant for matters I couldn't entrust to anyone else. His suit was perfect, his posture rigid. He motioned me forward with a small, contained gesture. "Riley," he said, "glad you came in early." His tone was polite but too careful, measured to the inch, like every syllable might be recorded. I sat across from him at the glossy table. He didn't offer coffee. I didn't ask. I slid a sealed envelope across the surface. His gloved hands, thin, latex, like a surgeon's, slipped the papers free. He scanned them, lips pressing into a faint line. "You've never asked for this much discretion before," he murmured. "Things change," I replied. He turned the top sheet toward himself. "This is Marlotech RD Holdings, the shell entity I set up for you months ago. Today, you want to transfer $1 million in stock. It'll appear as an internal reallocation. No alarms unless someone knows exactly where to look. Do it tonight," I said. My heart was hammering, but my mind was cold and clear, like a blade. Quietly, no announcements, just the shift. He exhaled slowly. "I'll file with shareholders, but I'll delay the notification for 90 days. It buys you time." Then, softer, almost paternal. "Be careful, Riley. Once you draw fire, you won't be invisible again." I gave a brief nod and rose. "I know." I left without coffee or small talk, stepping back into the brilliant daylight. The world outside went on as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Cars idling at lights, people checking their watches, mailboxes lined neatly along the curb. Ordinary life, unaware of the storm I was quietly setting in motion. My phone buzzed. A tagged post. Cressida, radiant at a gala, smiling as if she owned the world. I swiped it away without opening. By late morning, I arrived at the Vale family estate for brunch. The house loomed as it always had, grand, sprawling, lined with bay windows where white roses spilled over marble ledges. Inside, the cavernous dining room glimmered with polished silver and the low murmur of conversation. Light from the chandelier refracted across crystal glasses, making everything shimmer, like a tableau from some perfect false memory. Cressida was waiting at the far end of the room, directly beneath the chandelier. Her posture was flawless, her smile practiced, radiant on the surface, but I noticed the tiny flicker beneath the shine, her fingers tightening just slightly around a velvet box. "So glad you could join us," she said when she saw me, voice warm but rehearsed. She opened the box with deliberate grace, revealing a pearl pendant nestled inside like a captured moon. "Mother wanted me to have this after she passed," she said, eyes lingering on me with a hint of challenge. "A keepsake." I felt my throat tighten, but kept my voice calm. "Funny," I said evenly, sliding my hand along the edge of the table, grounding myself. "I bought that pendant with my bonus last year. You know that." Her composure cracked for a fraction of a second, a flicker of guilt or annoyance, but she smoothed it away with a thin smile. "Well," she said lightly, "perhaps she knew who truly deserved it." I didn't thank her. I didn't reach for the box. Instead, I raised my cup, the porcelain cool against my fingers. "You wore the pearl, Cressida," I said softly. "I wore the plan." The words hung between us like frost in the air, colder than any glare. For an instant, the chatter around us dimmed. A flashback rose unbidden. Years ago, the three of us, Mother, Cressida, and me, at a jeweler's shop. I had pointed at this very pendant, telling Mother, "Give it to the one who protects this family, not the one who only wants to control it." Mother had squeezed my hand then, her eyes full of something unspoken. That day I had felt seen. I wasn't sure if I'd ever feel that way again. As servers brought plates of quiche and fruit, polite laughter resumed around us. But beneath the surface of stolen identities and hidden stock transfers was something more insidious. The erasure of me, not just in legal documents, but in stories, in memory. Piece by piece, they were rewriting history until my existence no longer fit their narrative. By the time brunch wound down and guests drifted toward the gardens, I excused myself to the restroom. I pressed my palm to the cool tile, hands trembling, breathing through the surge of rage and resolve. "You want everything I am, Cressida," I whispered to my reflection, "but I'm not done being me yet." Back at the table, I slid my phone across the linen and began typing rapidly, a coded email to Astria. Attachments labeled S7 in transfer and asset separation. The subject line read, Plan B, go dark until phase 2. My thumb hovered, then pressed send. Cressida's eyes flicked toward me. She noticed. She raised an eyebrow. Arlo, seated farther down, glanced at me as well. Something like surprise, maybe even fear in his expression. But I smiled at them both, a small, steady smile they didn't know how to read. As we left the estate, the sky had darkened to slate. The gardens glistened wet, Mother's rose bushes jeweled with raindrops. I paused beside one, inhaling its scent, letting it anchor me to something older than this war, something pure. The fragrance was sharp and sweet, like memory itself. I slipped into the back seat of my car, seatbelt clicking into place. My phone pinged again. Shares, comments, whispers. The quiet post I'd written to my child earlier had stirred something online, a ripple traveling outward. I don't need the spotlight now, I thought as the driver pulled away. I just need the truth to catch fire. "You wore the pearl, Cressida," I whispered to myself as the estate receded in the rear window. I wore the plan, and the plan was already in motion. I drove to the Marlowe Tech headquarters under a pale Seattle sun, the kind of light that reveals fingerprints on glass and faces behind masks. The car's interior smelled of coffee and damp wool, and my hands rested on the steering wheel longer than necessary once I parked. I thought of the pearl pendant, of Cressida's smirk, of the coded email I'd sent Astria. Everything I had done had led to this room. Inside the lobby, polished marble floors echoed with footsteps of board members arriving in tailored coats. I walked slowly to the elevators, keeping my breathing steady. And the mirrored doors showed my reflection, hair tied back, navy blazer, face composed. My plan lived in a flash drive inside my briefcase, and Astria was a text away. When the elevator opened onto the executive floor, I could hear laughter spilling from the conference room. They were already inside. Through the glass walls, I could see Cressida at the head of the table, her posture regal, Arlo leaning in to whisper something. For a second, my stomach tightened. Then I straightened my back and pushed the door open. "Good afternoon," I said, voice even, every head turned. Some polite nods, some eyes narrowing. Cressida tilted her head, lips curling in what she imagined was charm. "Welcome home, Riley. May I present this quarter's agenda?" She slid a printed packet across the table without breaking eye contact. I took the packet, placed it in front of me, and didn't open it. "Not yet," I replied. The room went quiet. Beyond the glass, rain began to streak the windows, thin lines like scratches. A young assistant closed the door, leaving us alone. I placed my briefcase on the table and clicked it open. The projector remote lay waiting inside. I reached for it, felt the plastic under my fingers, and spoke clearly. "Before we begin, I have material the board should review." A murmur rippled across the table. Arlo shifted in his chair. Cressida's brow furrowed. With a click, the projector whirred to life, casting a blue glow across the room. On the screen appeared a folder labeled Internal Surveillance. The first file opened, an email chain dated 6 months prior. "We need her out before Q4, read the first line, Cressida's name in the sender field. "Monitoring ongoing." Another message popped up. "Hidden cameras in her office confirm she's not aware. Removal plan proceeds." A low hiss of breath came from one of the directors. The room's temperature seemed to drop. I advanced to the next slide, grainy stills from a hidden camera, my own office, my desk, my private meetings, all captured without consent. Timestamps lined the bottom of each frame. "This is illegal," someone whispered. My voice stayed calm. "Yes, and it was authorized by someone in this room." Cressida's fingers tightened around her pen. Her face had gone pale, but she said nothing. Arlo's lips parted, but no words came. The directors looked at each other, confusion and anger mingling. "You watched me from the shadows," I said quietly. "Today, you stand exposed." I pressed another button. Astria's pre-recorded video appeared on the screen. She wore a black blazer, hair neat, voice crisp. "These materials were collected and preserved under counsel's instruction. Chain of custody is intact. The surveillance constitutes a violation of Washington state privacy statutes and corporate ethics guidelines." Gasps, a cough. Someone muttered, "We can't have this tied to us." I folded my hands. "I request this meeting be paused. The board must review legal options immediately. In the meantime, my shares and role remain as written." Cressida finally spoke, voice trembling but defiant. "This is personal, Riley." "No," I cut in. "It's business of truth. You blurred the line long before I ever fought back." The projector screen stayed frozen on her email, her name in bold. One of the directors cleared his throat and said, "We need to move into executive session without the accused present." Another added, "Effective suspension pending counsel's review." Cressida pushed back her chair. "You're orchestrating this," she hissed. I met her gaze. I just stopped pretending. At the far end of the table, Arlo stared at the screen, face unreadable. For once, he didn't come to her defense. Astria slipped quietly into the room, nodded at me, and handed a folder to the board chair. "Independent verification," she said simply. The chair announced, "This meeting is recessed for 30 minutes. I gathered my briefcase slowly, letting the weight of the silence fill the space. As I reached the door, one of the junior directors actually started to clap. A single, awkward sound. Another followed. Soon the sound grew until it filled the room, not applause for me, but for the relief of truth. Cressida stood rigid, cheeks flushed, unable to speak. Her empire of whispers had been turned into evidence on a screen. I didn't smile. Not yet. I simply turned, opened the door, and stepped into the hallway where rainlight painted everything silver. They bought silence. I brought a spotlight. I stepped out into the hallway of Marlowe Tech just after the board meeting imploded, after every voice raised and every truth twisted beyond recognition. The sound of my own heart was thunder in my chest, louder even than the rain slamming against the wide glass windows that lined the hallway. The corridors stretched long and empty now, lined with sterile lighting and the echoes of people who had just watched me be ambushed. My heels clicked softly on the polished tile, but every step felt louder than it should have. Every sound carried the weight of betrayal. The floor, the ceiling, the framed press accolades on the wall, all felt complicit. I walked quickly toward the elevator, chin lifted even as my hands trembled. My mind was already racing ahead, calculating moves, building scaffolding around whatever dignity I still held. This wasn't over. By the time I made it to my condo, door shut, shoes kicked off, and keys clattering onto the kitchen counter, the world had already spun out of control. My phone buzzed like it was convulsing. Non-stop. Push notifications, news alerts, DMs, mentions from strangers I'd never met. Their words filled the screen before I could even process them. I turned on the TV, flipping to the local network, almost on autopilot. Breaking news flashed in red and white at the bottom of the screen. And there I was. Pixelated clips from the meeting, spliced together without context. A half second of me raising my voice. A still frame of my expression mid-sentence, frozen into something wild and unflattering. The headline bar rolled across in bold letters. Riley Vale, Tech CEO breakdown? Unstable behavior at Marlow Tech meeting. My own face stared back at me, flickering across the screen, eyes wide, mouth open. There was no context, no truth, just distortion. A new segment rolled in, a montage of past staff meetings, old footage, edited, sliced, a collection of gestures and glances twisted into a narrative I didn't recognize. The anchor's voice rang over it like a eulogy. Sources suggest Riley Vale has been under significant mental strain for months, with concerns raised internally about erratic conduct. I muted the volume, set the remote down with a click, and crossed the room to the sliding doors leading out to the balcony. I locked them quietly, letting the thick patter of rain muffle everything behind the glass. I needed the sound of the storm more than I needed the sound of the world. Inside, the condo felt too small, the air too thick, but I refused to shrink. The knock came early, not frantic, calculated. When I opened the door, Arlo stood there, perfectly dry, perfectly calm. Beside him were two men dressed in muted suits, the kind meant to blend in anywhere. One held a clipboard, the other a sleek black folder. There was something disturbingly professional about the scene, scripted, coordinated. "Riley," Arlo began, using the tone people reserve for the injured or unwell. "This is for your own good." My eyes narrowed. He gestured to the two men. "These are professional counselors. Licensed? Discreet? We're just here for a quick evaluation, that's all." I stared at him. "Counselors?" I asked, my voice even. "It's nothing formal," he said quickly. "You've been under a lot of pressure. Everyone saw what happened today. We just want to make sure you're okay." There it was, the oldest trick in the book. Paint the woman as hysterical, frame her as unwell, strip her voice with clinical concern. I stepped back inside, and I closed the door. A full minute hadn't passed before my phone rang again. Astria's name lit up the screen. I answered it with shaking fingers, but when I turned around, she was already there, calm, poised, seated in the living room. Her presence felt like an anchor in a storm. "I got your text," I said, stunned. He came to the door. "With people." "I know," she said, not surprised. "Did you consent to anything?" I shook my head. "No." "Good," she replied, her tone like tempered steel. "Then we file the injunction tonight. We pull access. He doesn't get to dictate the narrative anymore. I have your signed psychological eval. If they try to flip this in court, we preempt the play." My chest ached with gratitude, but I didn't cry. Not this time. She placed a manila folder on the table. Inside was everything: filings, statements, preemptive measures, every piece of it a move on the board. My defense was no longer reactive. We were going on offense. Later, she looked at me across the room and echoed something I'd once said, almost to myself. "When liars go low, I go legal." Those words felt like armor now, legal filings instead of tearful explanations. Paper over pity. Action over apology. A memory surfaced, unbidden, sharp. Years ago, after my miscarriage, I'd collapsed into Cressida's arms. I had trusted her. I had sobbed against her shoulder, let her comfort me, and now, those tears, that moment, archived, twisted, used to paint a portrait of instability. The betrayal made my bones ache. I opened my social page. I didn't choose a photo, didn't soften my words. I typed a single sentence. When liars go low, I go legal. Within minutes, the post exploded. Hundreds of likes, thousands of comments, some from strangers, some from people I hadn't spoken to in years. We see you. She's not crazy. She's being silenced. They messed with the wrong woman. The truth always finds light. I let the post ride, not to defend myself, but to bait the storm. That evening, I saw the next escalation. A local news channel airing doctored videos, fragments of late-night video calls, my voice clipped mid-sentence, shadows and lighting turned against me. A voiceover said I sounded incoherent, disoriented. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to disappear. But I didn't flinch. I leaned into the silence. I watched from the shadows as public opinion began to shift. A tech influencer, massive following, tweeted, "This is a textbook smear. These clips are an insult to mental health survivors everywhere. Do better." The tweet spread like wildfire. Thousands of shares. The comments filled with empathy, anger. People were waking up. I stood on my balcony, arms crossed against the chill of night. The city lights shimmered in the dark water below, fractured reflections dancing like 1,000 quiet truths no one could cage. The rain had stopped, but its memory still clung to the air. Inside, the living room was washed in warm light. Safe, ready, I exhaled. For the first time, I felt something shift. You tried to bury me in madness. You tried to make me your cautionary tale, but I took every stone you threw and built a staircase, and I'm still climbing. The corridor outside the podcast studio felt narrower than I remembered, charged with tension. I passed staffers whispering in stunned tones, camera crews setting up lights. My heart beat as though it carried a separate life. I straightened my shoulders and entered the green room. Minutes earlier, I had sent the pre-recorded audio files to the host and legal team. I sipped lukewarm water, sliding earbuds into my jacket pocket. The studio door opened, and Cressida's face appeared on the monitor, smiling as though she owned every room she entered. Arlo lingered behind her. Their confidence was a mask. "Ready?" the producer asked me. I nodded. I sat beneath bright lights. The host's voice rang clear. "Tonight we present Behind the Betrayal, Riley Marlowe's story." I looked directly into the camera. My voice was calm, controlled. 3 weeks ago, my life was rewoven without my consent. Today, I offer the record, unedited, time-stamped, original files. This isn't revenge. It's record correction. They played the first audio clip, Cressida's voice whispering, "If we cut her out quietly, she'll never see it coming." Then Arlo, "She's not even my type. I married the brand." The room went silent. A pause hung. The next clip, board meeting conversations, hidden audio logs where Cressida says, "We need her gone by Q4. Don't let her see this." I closed my eyes briefly and held on to composure. I had waited for this moment. The video dropped online within minutes. Justice for Riley trended. Lawyers, bloggers, experts weighed in. Some said this was a masterstroke in CEO transparency. Others called it a fight for justice in an era of cancel culture. Posts flooded in, "She's unbreakable." They messed with the wrong one. Who hides audio to hide truth? Meanwhile, I rushed to file a defamation and fraud suit at the courthouse. Reporters lined the plaza. Cressida arrived in smart black, face measured. When I passed her, she gave me a tight smile. Arlo stood behind her, reticent. Cameras flashed. In the courtroom lobby, the crowd hushed. I walked to the dais. My attorney, Astria, nodded at me as Brenna, the former assistant, stepped forward and spoke. "I falsified the documents under Cressida's orders. I'm sorry." Gasps. Cressida's eyes froze. Arlo's jaw dropped. The crowd parted like a river for a stone. Inside the courtroom, the board of Marlowe Tech announced they were suspending Cressida pending investigation. Arlo resigned before questions even landed. I was named interim CEO with full rights restored. Legal notices circulated. When it was over, I stood before the press, voice steady. You tried to bury me in the shadows of secrecy, but I brought the truth into the light. Then I added, forgiveness isn't weakness, but forgetting. That's a luxury I'll never allow again. The room fell quiet. Reporters murmured. Cameras clicked. Outside, rain came down steady. It took betrayal to remember who I was before they buried me in family. I stepped beyond the courthouse doors into sunlight so sharp it felt like judgment. My cheeks were wet from rain or tears. I couldn't tell which. The world had shifted beneath my feet, and this moment was nothing like before. 2 months ago, I would have trembled walking here. Now my pulse was measured. I tucked my son's hand into mine, guiding him forward with a quiet certainty. Reporters lined the sidewalk, cameras trained, microphones thrust just past my shoulder. I gave them a small nod, then we passed into a waiting vehicle. Later, I stood barefoot in my garden. The soil was damp, the roses heavy with rain. I knelt down and pressed my fingers into the earth, planting a small rose bush beside my mother's headstone. I set a plaque at its base. She grew where they tried to bury her. Sunlight filtered through clouds. Bees drifted in the air. I inhaled deeply. For the first time in a long while, nothing felt urgent. At home, I sat at my desk and began writing a letter I'd never send. The paper trembled slightly as I penned the words. I no longer need your apology. I just needed the truth exposed. My hand wavered, then steadied. I folded it neatly, placed it in an envelope addressed to Cressida, but never dropped it in a mailbox. A short drive later, I stopped at a gas station for coffee. Outside, a familiar car idled. Arlo's silhouette was visible through the windshield. He looked at me. For a fleeting instant, our eyes met. He nodded, mouth parted, then turned away. I pressed on, refusing to let that moment shift anything. Silence had become my loudest refusal. That afternoon, I sat across from my therapist in a small, quiet office downtown. The walls were painted soft blue. A window looked out toward Maple Street. The rain tapped at the glass. Tell me how you feel, she said gently. I swallowed. I don't want revenge. I paused. I want roots. A life so grounded my son knows I didn't let them erase me. She nodded. That's strength. I thought of the days I bent to please, the nights I questioned whether I belonged. Now I offered a new legacy to him, one not built on approval, but on integrity. Next, I went downtown to finalize the custody hearing. The courtroom was small, windows high, pale oak walls, no press, no cameras, just the judge, attorneys, and us. I asked for reinstatement of full custody. Cressida's side offered no argument. She had no standing left. The judge approved. I exhaled. I emerged into the afternoon light, my son clutching my hand. Journalists called out. I offered them a quiet smile. No speeches, no drama. Just, today, I bring him home. That evening in the kitchen, I lit a white candle on the dining table. My son sat across from me, coloring. The room glowed soft. I cleared a place for two. I said softly, Mom always said family is more than blood. He looked up, curious. I continued, You were wrong about who the protector was, but I forgive you too. He nodded, and I felt a warmth in my chest I thought would never return. Outside, shadows lengthened. The roses in the garden dropped petals on the walkway. I closed my eyes and whispered, You can survive betrayal. But choosing to grow after it, that's the real rebellion. Before we wrap up this story, here's something worth holding on to. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who teach us how to stand alone. Riley didn't just survive betrayal. She reclaimed her power, her identity, and her voice. It's a reminder that silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it's the sound of planning your comeback. What would you do if the ones you trusted most turned on you? Let me know in the comments. And if you found this story powerful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's more coming that'll leave you speechless.